house must be ocean.
It is, today is September the 30th, 2025 at 6 p.m. This is the meeting of the Marshfield Town Administrator Screening Committee. Tonight, this is, I believe, not being televised, but it is simply being recorded this evening. So, the first item on the agenda that we all have is the Chairman's Welcome. What I'm about to say has not come from the Select Board. It has not come from the Collins Center. It has not come from any elected public official. It's simply coming from my soul. Each one of you are the best. You've all been selected from a group of many other candidates. We're coming together as strangers. We really don't know one another. But there's something in us that the Select Board and the people that chose us saw in each one of us. Tonight and going forward, we're going to shape history. This is, in all the years I've been in Marshfield, when we've had town administrators, there was a different process. People wanted change. People wanted transparency. This is our chance. And people are watching. And we need to do a good job. Each one of us. We're going to become a team. We might be strangers now, but my goal is when we leave, we're going to be colleagues that have done a good job and did the best that we could. So this committee, as I say about shaping history, this TA selection is going to impact young families, schools, our fields for the kids, seniors, homeowners, renters, what our budget's going to be, taxpayers, etc. But we have to do it right. Otherwise, I'm telling you, we're going to go back to the status quo. The Select Board and elected officials also chose the Collins Center. We hired them. The taxpayers hired them. They paid $14,000 for their services. They're invaluable. As your chair, I can tell you, as the liaison, I've been in contact with them, and what they are already doing, I would struggle. They're doing background checks. They're posting things in newspapers. They're doing advertisements. They're doing it right. Things that I don't think I could do for you. Now, there's something that I wanted to talk about. I had some reservations, but I am going to discuss it. It's about social media. And some of the social media that I've heard and seen, some of it's good, but unfortunately some of it's not so good. I've heard things like our committee is shady, or we've already picked somebody. Or maybe even some of the behavior that maybe we've demonstrated. But as your chair, my role is to be a liaison to the Collins Center to listen to all of you. And the chair and the committee's role is not recruiting. Our goal is to screen and reach a consensus on which town administrator candidates, which ones we're going to put forward. A chair needs to be selected for this committee, and I am grateful that you selected me. I pledge to uphold the principles of the oath that I took and that all of you took that are sitting here tonight. And for those other members that aren't here tonight, they took the same oath. I've guided by a commitment to all of you, and I tried to come up with a little acronym that would summarize what I hope we're all going to be doing together and that I will be doing as your chair. And it's FAST. I'll say it again, FAST. So the F is for fair in all deliberations and decisions. The A is to allow civil input from all members, ensuring everyone's voice is heard. S is for selective, in identifying the best town administrator for the town of Marshfield and reach a consensus. The T is for thorough in screening. This pledge reflects my dedication to integrity, inclusivity, and excellence in service to the committee. We want to come together as a team, although we started as strangers. Let's get started.
Well said.
Andy, I have a suggestion for the agenda. We should put some sort of thing about general discussion on this, so we're not in violation of open meeting law when we have discussions. They're not strictly adhering to this agenda.
I'm not familiar with all the laws. This is the first time I've acted as a chair. I'd like to defer to Phil. Sometimes in some meetings, as you know, Steve, there's town council. It's a little different what we're doing. So Phil, do you have thoughts on that?
You can have an agenda item for discussion, general discussion. You want to try to be as specific as possible on an agenda. So if you put general discussion, a member of the public reviewing that agenda would have no idea what that is, a general discussion about what.
So we can name it then. We can name it as a general discussion about how the board will operate.
Right, so that's my point. You would have to have a little definition.
Yeah, and
So
put a
that-
couple of definitions so they cover a big broader field.
You have to be a little bit careful about being too broad, but it is possible to have a general discussion. Typically, you want to have them associated with a specific agenda item or at least some definition, because the point of an agenda, there's multiple points to an agenda, but one of the primary purposes for agenda for the purposes of public meetings is to give any member of the public a fair, actually the old colonial term is fair warning, of what could be discussed at a meeting. So if they have an interest, they would attend or they could monitor it in some other fashion. So you can have an item that says general discussion, but you should have some
Yeah, so
further
say
definition.
for instance, I had a question for the Collins Center,
Mm-hmm.
like as in, is every single applicant that comes to you gonna be brought to us to
Yes.
review?
Yes.
So that's things like that.
Yeah, and that was, I think that was also described both at the,
Yeah.
that was also talked about at the
I
select
was
board
just making an
meetings.
example.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
I wasn't answering the question, I was making an
yeah,
example.
no. Typically, if
Because we don't wanna be limited in what we can talk about to, to some strict guidelines. you know.
Well, you have, because it's an open meeting, there are some limitations as to what
I
you can talk about.
totally understand that, that's why I said that.
And you really want the agenda to be reflective of what you reasonably anticipate discussing. And if there is an item that comes up that is not on the agenda and is of some substance, the best way to handle it, in my experience and observation, is to say, okay, that's an item that has substance, and we're gonna put that on a future agenda so that people will understand that there's gonna be a discussion of something of substance. If it's something that's mundane, you know, what's our next meeting date, you know, something like that.
Right, those things aren't covered under
Right.
open meeting law anyway.
Right.
But I'm talking about discussions we're having about what we're doing.
Right, and, you know, again, I think there was a pretty healthy discussion at the last meeting as to what the process is.
Right.
But certainly,
But as we go on, there'll be other things coming up, and so just to put a general disclaimer in there about we might, if something comes up, we're gonna talk about it. I mean, the general
Well-
discussion is gonna be about what we're doing and how we're doing it and things that come up. And it pretty much gives us a blanket, okay, on, you know, in this
well,
type of, in
as
this
a,
type of
as
committee.
as a practical matter, the next series of meetings are executive session meetings. Because there's a meeting tonight that is, got these agenda items, but the primary work product out of tonight's meeting is to arrive at a good set of questions.
But we should open and close every meeting with an open meeting.
That would be something that the committee can certainly decide, you can do that if you like. But as a practical matter, the next several meetings will be, the next meeting will be review of all applicants received in order to determine who would receive an interview. And then the following meetings, depending on the number of interviews, you know, if you have, let's say you have 6 folks you want to interview as an example, typically that would be 2 meetings, 3 per meeting. Just looking at just when people can start a meeting.
So if you give us 40 applicants, are we gonna split them up for us to look at, or everybody gets the 40 applicants?
Each committee member will get the packet that will have every applicant and what they submitted. So
Okay.
typically, an application will have a cover letter and their resume.
Right.
Every committee member will get those. Each committee member will be asked to review those in advance of the next meeting and be prepared to say, here are my yeses, here are my nos, here are my maybes. And then there's a table that's created in executive session saying, okay, here's, this candidate got 5 yeses, 2 nos. This candidate got 7 yeses. This candidate got 3 yeses, 3 maybes, 1 no. Okay, that's somebody we have to figure out, do we move them to a yes column? Do we leave them in the maybe column? Or do we move them to the no column? So forth and so on. So there's a deliberative process that will go on after you have reviewed. Each committee member, again, will get a full packet. The meeting following this meeting, assuming we get through the questions tonight, will be that deliberative process to kind of figure out who you want to interview. The subsequent meetings will be the actual interviews. And typically committees will, on the conclusion of the last interview, deliberate and say, okay, we've now seen all the people that we want to interview. Here's who we recommend going forward to the select board. Sometimes a committee will schedule a separate meeting for deliberation. It just depends on the committee. More often than not, people, by the time they finish the interviews, want to get the job done, and they've got things kind of fresh in their mind, and so that has a benefit. But that's something the committee will also have control over, of how you want to do that deliberative process. Okay?
Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. And I'm going to ask my Vice Chair, Dennis Kelleher, if you would be kind enough to just distribute the minutes to all of the members.
I was gonna say, do a speech like you did, I wasn't prepared.
It's good.
And everyone can just take a moment, just a moment. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the minutes, but while it's being distributed, I just want to give a shout out to Jackie Mason, the clerk, who has done a stellar job putting together the agenda, putting together the minutes as well, And we've had many amendments, and in keeping with the open meeting law, she has always been in full compliance. And I just want to make a thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, very good job, thank you.
Sure, excellent.
All right, so if everybody's had an opportunity to look at the minutes and review the minutes, I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes.
Second?
Third.
Okay,
Everybody say?
all approved?
Okay, all right.
It's unanimous, approved of the minutes.
Jackie, just the Scribners, my last name is all E's.
So,
Oh.
and then one more question, so the
Yep.
two missing members, are they can't Zoom, or how, what's the story?
I
Chris?
think, I-
2, 4, 5.
we have a quorum,
4, 5.
All E's, yeah.
we have a
Yeah.
quorum,
Okay,
but
right, so one missing member, right, okay.
I believe it's Chris.
Yeah.
So we might want to, thank you, Steve. Everyone present with one exception, namely Chris. And when we have attendance, we're going to have the attendance of all the names, Jackie, please, if you would be so kind.
Yep.
Next item on the open agenda is the open meeting law discussion. We're going to try to limit our meeting tonight to get out by 7:45. That's gonna be our goal, but we don't want to,
Red Sox game will be over here by
I
then.
believe it's a hard stop. I was gonna say that there's something in this room after.
I think there is, yes, very possibly. And yes, for the general public, I am a big Red Sox fan, and it started at 6 o'clock, and trust me, I wish I was watching TV at home.
We live stream it or what?
I second that.
Okay.
Somebody's following the score.
But this is off, this is off of our agenda, so forgive me, but that one was just personal privilege. All right, so Mary has received questions already, and she's incorporated some of the comments and questions. But just a reminder for everyone about our open meeting law. I want to speak specifically to a couple of very important items. Emails. If we're emailing, the only emails that at this point, they really should go between the clerk and the chair, and then I'm the liaison. We do not want to have emails going to all, where there's an email that's sent out to all of us. That would be in violation. Many of you probably know these rules, but it bears worth repeating, because then we're in violation. We do not want to do that. As well as do not text. Do not,
That's perfect.
Sorry, it was impeccable.
for full disclosure, my wife just texted that Chris is running late and he's on his way. So, all right, I will try to follow the rules, sorry about that. Can you believe that? But I am glad it's being recorded. All right. Okay, do not text during meetings, as well as do not text each other certainly when we're even in executive session and we're reviewing candidates. We should not be doing that. We should not be doing that with a laptop. We should not be doing that with a cell phone. We pretty much know that when we gather in a group of 4 or more, we're in violation. I see some of you sometimes in town. Say hello, we can talk. It's the 4 that's the critical piece.
If you're deliberating.
Well, even I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're in a group of 4, and someone starts to bring up the name of a candidate or how you feel about
So
this.
that would be
or-
part of deliberation.
Yes, and I believe Phil is going to cover some of that item on the agenda. But thank you, Steve. Confidentiality. This is a critical component for us to follow as a committee. Any of the names of any candidates, we shouldn't share with anyone. For the record, I know no name of anyone at this point that is applying for the town administration position in Marshfield. You might wonder, why is it so important? And I spoke with the Collins Center because I had an idea, but I really wanted to hear it from them. And many of these people could potentially be already employed. And if they're employed and their names get out, they're jeopardizing, in fact, their possible positions where they're at. So it's critical, and I'm sure we're all going to follow that. Also, with our questions, the confidentiality of questions, we're interviewing or speaking to the candidates, but when we have the questions, we're not asking a group all at once. You know, sometimes what you see on congressional hearings or something like that, there's 3 or 4 people, they're all hearing the same questions and they all get a chance to answer. It's a little different. This is a situation where we're going to have a candidate and then perhaps another candidate, and they're limited in the number of time. We don't want to give anyone, and we won't do this, we won't give anybody an edge up. As far as questions, there's going to be a time limitation of 2 questions for each of the committee members. Now, as your chair, I did,
Chris.
Yeah,
I'll
sorry.
let.
Not from the outside usually.
I can get it.
Thank you, Steve.
Password.
Secret handshake.
Get smart.
Was it locked in too?
Uh-oh.
Really?
It's a tight door.
Hi,
I told you it was
It's
growing,
growing.
it's nothing.
It was growing.
Actually,
Chris,
you can
there's a
leave the door
spot, there's a spot.
Leave the
right
door
here.
open.
Yeah, not all the way, yeah, just, that's fine.
Hey, Chris. How you doing?
That's all right, things happen. So now, we have, there we go.
We're on agenda item number 3, just
All right.
Sorry, he needs a copy for
Yeah.
the meeting minutes.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Chris. Here's our agenda, and I'm going to give you a copy of the minutes as well. There you go, sir.
Thank you.
Do you approve of the minutes?
I think you'd have to revote it if you did that.
Oh, okay.
We've already passed them.
Yeah.
It's already-
That's already
Okay.
been said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
I just wanted to
There's
give
no
him an
no
opportunity.
controversy.
But you would have to technically revote it.
All right.
But, you know.
But
pass-
are you,
I am.
but he is, so let the record show it's unanimous. Or,
I think you're fine with the way it
Okay.
is.
all right, thank you. All right. All right, we're, questions, and just to kind of circle back so Chris has an opportunity. Right now, we're at a point where we're talking about confidentiality and how important it is. And we were addressing the questions that we as a committee will be able to ask the candidates. And it's going to be critical that that type of information doesn't get out to anyone.
Yes.
It's confidentiality is critical. And I was just at the point where I was saying there's going to be 2 questions that each of us on the committee will be able to ask. I wasn't that comfortable with being limited to only 2 questions. I'm looking
And we
for,
will actually verbalize that question, each person?
there are 2 questions that each of us will ask of candidates, different questions, but they'll be limited to 2 questions
I know, but I
each.
mean, am I personally gonna ask the applicant my questions, or
I think the way
or are
it's,
you gonna ask the questions I want?
it can be done one of, typically, if I may, Mr. Chair.
You're recognized to
Thank you.
Phil, to defer
It
to
can be
Phil on
done
that
one
question.
of 3 ways. So some committees will have the chair ask, first of all, the work product for tonight is to arrive at 14 questions, okay? And that's driven through, partly by, there's a time constraint. I mean, every applicant has about 50 minutes to at most an hour. And believe me, to talk to her an hour is a long time for any candidate. Some committees will have the chair ask all the questions. Read the question, you literally read the question to the candidate. Candidate answers, chair says, are there any follow-ups? Recognizes any member of the committee that might have a follow-up question. That's model 1. Model 2 is 14 questions, 7 members. Everybody has 2 questions they're gonna ask off the list. You'll read the question as it's precisely written for each candidate. So each candidate hears the exact same set of questions, okay? Obviously, their answers are gonna be unique to each candidate, and follow-ups may be unique to each candidate. And then there's a third model where you have a member of the Collins Center ask the question, simply be the newsreader, so to speak, and just ask the question, sit back. Then when the person has finished the question, does anybody have any follow-up questions? If people have follow-ups, chair recognizes people in the order. Let's say 3 people raise, they'll say, okay, I'm gonna recognize Steve, and I'm gonna recognize so forth and so on. Move through the follow-ups in that fashion. So you can decide on which of those models that you want.
So we need to have Jackie put that on the agenda, a vote to decide which of the 3 ways we're gonna do it.
Yeah, you can do that at the next meeting.
Okay.
Or you can even do it, I think your agenda question for, it's deliberation, discussion, and decision on questions. I think it actually would cover that tonight.
You
depending-
might be able to do it tonight?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think that, again, the key work product for this evening is to finalize the questions. And when I say finalize, this is the typical process. So tonight, or a committee, when they're at this meeting, this type of meeting, will finalize the questions, taking notes, I'm gonna capture the changes or whatever it might be. At the next meeting, there'll be a kind of a final vote in case there's Scribner's errors, in case there's, problems with some question or not. It's not a revisitation of the entire set, it's just a kind of reaffirmation that the edits have been captured faithfully, okay? And then the next meeting, the bulk work product for the next meeting is to sort the resumes and to try to figure out who the interviews are going to be. So that's the primary work product of the next meeting. And then the successive meetings, depending on how many interviews there are going to be, will be interview evenings, or interview meetings. It may not be evening, that's something that needs to be determined, but will be interviews. And typically you'll do 3, most committees can do 3 interviews in one meeting. Because if you kind of think about how that works, that ends up being almost a 4-hour meeting. By the time you kind of show up, you settle in, the candidate comes in, you do the first interview, you have a 15-minute break or so between interview 1 and interview 2, so people can go to the bathroom and stretch their legs, whatever. You bring interview 2 in, so forth and so on. So typically 3 interviews in any given meeting is kind of the max. I think if you go beyond that, you just get fatigued as committee members. So that's just kind of the process.
Can I ask?
If the chair
Okay,
allows it.
you're recognized. Yep, Linda?
So I know that we're limited on time for the questions, so it's 14 questions, which makes sense. But if there's follow-up, and depending on the candidate and their response, there could be either a lot of follow-up or
There could be
not.
sometimes no follow-up.
Right, so what happens if the time limit starts to get out of hand and we haven't asked all 14 questions?
Typically, either the chair or a member of the Collins Center, depending on, will be kind of the timekeeper and
Okay.
can simply say, we're running a little short on time, and that's a communication to the candidate. They have to be a little more concise. It's kind of a communication to everybody else that, we're kind of running on time. In most instances, it will bump right up against, kind of the max. Sometimes you may have a candidate that is, like myself, a very wordy person, who loves to talk. And so you're gonna have to, say to that candidate, well, you gotta pull it in a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris,
Hi.
recognize?
The questions in looking at what was given to us, I mean, some of them might be overlapping as well, and I think that for that sake of time, there may be those opportunities where we'll see that candidate had said something that may have touched on a part of my question or something like that. I mean, wouldn't that be kind of normal that?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think Phil is gonna cover some of that
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
we will answer your question, Chris.
Right,
And-
right.
And about the questions with that model, if in fact we select the model where we each ask questions and it's limited to 2, as your chair, I was uncomfortable with that. I had contacted the Collins Center and I suggested and asked if it would be possible to have 3 questions for each of the committee members. And I think Phil just covered it very well. The answer is time.
14 questions is actually a lot for the entire.
Actually,
You wanna jump into questions?
right now, we're at deliberation, discussion, decision. Yes, absolutely. If I defer to Phil at this point in the meeting. Or Phil?
Christie had a question.
Can I just make
Oh.
a clarifying question?
Chris is recognized.
The town administrator position profile, this was done in conjunction with the select board and the Collins Center.
The process for that is, I interviewed each member of the select board. Each member was asked the same set of basic questions, to get an understanding of what the select board's priorities were, what their thoughts were in terms of important issues in the town, so forth and so on. Those thoughts reflected within the community profile. So the community profile has a combination of some factual information. It's got an excerpt from your master plan that kind of describes the community. And it's got a sense of kind of some of the bigger issues that the members of the select board identified. The select board ultimately adopted the community profile as part of the process, so that that reflects their perspective on the town administrator position. And it is their prerogative under your town charter. That's one of their probably most important functions, is to hire and select and to hire a town administrator to execute their policy vision.
And with that said, I thank you. I know when we were asked to kind of look at the questions and kind of gauge some things to add or to it, I kind of used that as a basis for it. I think this was kind of like a chart in a way to formulate questions so that when they're just not so canned in a way, but they're rather referencing
Yeah.
the things of which the select board is going to be.
Well, the concept behind the question, if I can, I'll ask the chair if I can. I'll dive
Absolutely.
into kind of the questions, and I'll start at kind of the 10,000 foot level, which speaks precisely to your point. So you were all, there was an original distribution of the original set of questions.
Can my vice president distribute that?
President, I just gotta promote it. This is great.
Sure. 1, 2 on that side, and I'll throw 3 over here. Okay. So this was kind of the original set of questions that were distributed. And they are open-ended questions. And they're specifically designed that way because the goal is to get candidates, and they're double-sided, so the goal in the questioning process is to get the candidate to speak and to try not to lead them with too much information in a question. So you really don't want to say, well, can you tell me about your thoughts on redevelopment of Route 139 and the MBTA zoning act? A couple of reasons why you don't want to get, first of all, that could be a question for the select board for a finalist, but more importantly, many candidates are not going to have an intricate knowledge of the town of Marshfield. I would expect any candidate to do some research on the town of Marshfield and be able to understand, I think a good candidate will have looked at 2 or 3 annual reports, will have looked at a couple of budgets, will have maybe done some,
Would they have access to that?
oh yeah, that's the
Yeah.
job advertisement.
Right.
That's the
Okay.
advertisement for the
Right.
position.
Well, just to kind of clarify why, when I made some adjustments to some of the questions, again, they were just my suggestions, so it's up to us to be able to decide on that. But I just was taking some things that I thought would be
Yep.
kind of dovetail to it.
And we'll see if they have read that,
Right.
because their answers will have that. One of the other things that we
Right.
don't do in questions, oftentimes you'll see as kind of a standard opening question in an interview is, tell us about yourself and why do you want this job? Okay, I don't care what job it is, that's a very standard opening question. We don't start that way, and the reason why is, first of all, you're gonna have their cover letter, and you're gonna have their resume. And we don't want them to spend 10 minutes regurgitating their resume or talking about their cover letter. You'll know what their experience is based on their resume, and then through the questions, you'll get further definition of how that experience has played into their career and their perception of what the position is and so forth. We're really trying to get candidates to talk quite a bit, and many committee members kind of inputted back as to thoughts they had on how to adjust questions. And there's a second set, we've tried to incorporate those thoughts into a revised set of questions, not word for word. And in some cases, we didn't get as granular as some of the people wanted in their questions, because again, the concept is keep it open-ended. We want to get these candidates talking. And the things that people have identified, so for instance, there was a point somebody said, well, can you kind of tell us, how often you've run a surplus or a deficit in your budget? Something to that effect. And again, I'm not going to attribute comments to anybody. I'm just going to give you a sense of general comments. Interesting question. And through the course of their discussion of, well, what do you do when you develop a budget? How is that? What is your budgetary process? You're going to hear some of those answers. And if they don't give you that answer, you can ask that as a follow-up. But you don't necessarily want to lead the question, so to speak. You really want open-ended questions to get them talking and to see, first of all, how they communicate. What do they think is important in the question that has been asked of them? And, what is their process of kind of prioritizing, on their feet, and synthesizing the information that they want to present. So, again, this is a screening process. This is not their final interview. So the role of the committee is to, again, start with a universe that's this big. You're then going to distill the universe to a set of interviews. And from the set of interviews, you're going to further distill it to some number of candidates you're going to recommend that the select board interview more intensively. Okay? So that's the general concept. So with that,
If my vice chair would distribute that, please, vice chair, not vice president, I stand corrected.
I'm gonna soar tomorrow.
so for instance, there were a couple of folks that had questions or comments around conflict of interest. So we tried to incorporate something, one person had like a very specific example. It was too, it was too specific. It had to do with, what would happen if a husband, do you think a husband of an employee should do X? That's, a bit specific. But we actually asked a more general question because we saw there was interest on the committee to have them comment on conflict of interest issues. So we kind of asked, conflict of interest is a real issue in municipal work. What is your knowledge and approach to managing issues of conflict and perception of conflict? Because the comments we had from 2 folks, one was an actual kind of case study, how would you handle this particular instance, and another one spoke to the word perception. Because perception of conflict is very important as well, as an example. So when you see the recommended questions, we've made some changes. We haven't incorporated everybody's comments because some of the comments were questions that would be kind of leading and provide too much information to an applicant as to what you're looking for. We'd really much rather have a more open-ended question. And then as you're listening to the answers, you know, if you have your own, you're gonna have your own little kind of sense of, well, you know, it didn't really answer much about their municipal budget, or, you know, didn't sound very strong on, community development issues or capital projects or whatever the case may be. And again, you'll have the opportunity to ask follow-ups. It's interesting on the follow-ups because there are some times when there will be no follow-ups to a question and you just move on. And then there are other times there might be 3 or 4 follow-ups. And it just, every committee has, and you know, each one of you comes to this with a particular lens of what you may think is important for Marshfield. And you're kind of putting that in context of the community profile. But, you know, I know Steve, for instance, is very concerned about affordability in the community, about people being able to live here. He expressed that at one of the meetings, which is, you know, very common thing for people to be concerned about. There are others that may be concerned about, well, what's your relationship with school departments? Very common thing for people to be concerned about. So the questions are purposely designed to be open-ended, to see what these folks say. You'll have opportunities for follow-up, but you really want to hear what they have to say, not so much what we want them to say. And that's kind of the reason for the questions being very open-ended and not particularly specific, because it would not be fair to candidates to ask a question about, geez, I understand the library has had problems with its roofing system and leaks over the years. What would you do about that? Well, okay, well, you know, I've done school building projects of that nature. I can give you a general answer, but I don't really have a specific knowledge of what's happening in this building, because I'm not coming from here. But they might come up and they'll say, well, what's their process for doing, you know, capital improvements or something of that nature. So the are you a manager or a leader? Again, there were some comments on that. Some folks wanted the question to be further defined. Our feeling on that is, don't give further definition. Let's see what they say as to, are they picking up? There's really kind of a 2-part answer there. Because a town administrator is both. You know, they lead the workforce. And there's ramifications to that, and they should be talking about that. And they're also managing the administrative operations of the community. And so there's different levels of response there as an example. Describe your level of experience and direct involvement in creating a municipal budget, capital plan, and so forth. What you'll most likely hear from folks is, what is their budgetary, what's their role in the budget process? What is their process? They'll explain that. And you'll hear that from folks as to what their experience has been. If there's a candidate that is not upfront, have municipal background, they very well might say, well, I don't have any direct experience with municipal budgets, but, you know, in the private sector, I manage budgets of a certain size, I've got a number of employees under my supervision, and so forth and so on. So, you know, those are value judgments you're going to have to apply when you start evaluating the candidate, as an example. So I guess the question is as we kind of go through these, we have to arrive at 14 questions. And I think the way this is laid out, we're kind of there. We've added, the A's are kind of reflective of the comments that we received. So there were some questions, some people had comments about, well, how do you hold departments accountable? You know, what's your process to make a department accountable? And so we've added that. How do you hold department heads accountable? Pretty straightforward question. It's going to be an interesting answer. But it's going to be an answer that will help you as folks that have to kind of make a recommendation ultimately. You'll get a very good sense of what their style is and, you know, how they do that. And you'll hear different answers from candidates. Most important role for a town administrator. I mean, they should be able to kind of articulate what they feel is, you know, the most prominent aspect of their. And then there were some questions that were kind of human resource related. Some were a bit, again, too specific. You know, tell us about a conflict you had recently. You know, that's a tough question for somebody to answer. Professionally, if somebody asked me that question, and it was in an unaffiliated, you know, I was applying for this job, and somebody asked me that question, I'd say, I'm sorry, I can't talk about that. Even if I tell you in general terms, you may be able to infer who was involved in that. what was the nature of that and so forth. So it puts a candidate in a very difficult position, because even if I say, well, yeah, I had a department head that did X, Y, and Z, you know, I could be skating on some privacy issues and confidentiality issues that could be a bit, talking about a conflict and you know, how they've experienced it as supervisors, really a little more general, but it will give you an insight as to their process of how they handle conflict, what steps do they take, you know, if somebody comes to them and reports something, do they recognize that as a potential significant liability to the community, or do they, you know, try to diffuse it without recognizing the importance of it, as an example? So again, that's one of those questions that every manager will, the last portion of that question, what would you do differently? Anybody who's any good, in my estimation, will say, yeah, you know, on reflection, here are 3 things I would have done differently. Because human resource management is probably the most difficult portion of a town manager, town administrator job. And you're always second guessing yourself. Did I do that right? Did I, you know, because you're dealing with people, and there's significant, you know, you're affecting people's lives. So anyway, so these are the kind of recommended questions that we have for folks. And so we'd like it, I don't know if you want to just go through each one and say if we're okay.
I have my own questions.
Okay, did you submit those at a little
No.
older? Okay,
We had a deadline for the submission of the questions. It was Monday.
I have questions that I wrote that I think that my 2 friends that are on the Board of Selectmen want to hear the answer to.
But they're gonna have an opportunity to ask those questions.
They will have that
Them
opportunity
ask them
as,
first.
I just,
Wally?
okay, I just put in, again, next time I'll come and take my shirt off so you can see the scars that I've gone through. I've done a lot of, short version of a long story that I'm not gonna bore you with. I've done a lot of research committees, and I've been on the opening end of where the Collins people end up saving the day, and I've identified a lot of the problems that move people out of town administrative positions. Okay, so that's short version. 3 items I would bring to your attention. Number 1, whether you agree with it or not, you think life is fair or not, 80% of the success of a manager in any area is in human relations and in human communication, particularly in terms of 4 things: speaking, listening, writing, and obviously in terms of being able to communicate to an audience in a conflict kind of situation. I've got all sorts of books I can bring in to show you that if you're interested. Part of that is also in the sense in terms of, particularly in this town and other things that I have not necessarily directly experienced, but I've heard it from a lot of people. The communication problem is a major issue here. A major issue that, if we're serious on what you're doing as a search committee, you gotta keep that in mind in terms of who you're bringing in. You're going to, number 2, you're gonna read and you're gonna hear people that have read the same interview books that you have. What the standard questions are and what the standard answers are they're gonna give you. They're gonna be well rehearsed, okay? Number 3, I tell people, this is Academy Award night when they're coming for the interviews. They have gone through all sorts of preparation, whether you like it or not, you think life is fair or not, that's what you're looking at. You have people that have been prepped, they've gone through a ton of stuff. You will also see, and I'll bring it next week, I thought I had it with me, but in the Massachusetts government section of the Mass government, of many things that are in there, I don't know, it's human resources anyway. It's again in terms of what to look for in a town administrator. I can guarantee every person that we interview is going to have read that. And they're going to be prepared for that. So you think you might want to read it. I don't know whether I can legally introduce that or not, but you ought to. I can at least tell you where it is and you go read it on your own.
Well, it's a great idea. It's part of FAST.
Yeah.
The T equals thorough.
Right. The thing about
Great
it,
idea.
yeah, the thing about it is that you need to recognize that for better or worse, richer or poor, we're dealing with a lot of dregs that have not been hired by other towns that are coming in. And this sifting and sorting of that. The Collins people are probably going to be able to say to us, I don't know whether they can or not, this person is, I guess they can't say this person is a loser from 4 towns away or something like that.
Well, we would never,
I know.
what I will say is, we would never say anybody is a drag, we never say anybody is a loser. But you're gonna have a deliberative process, we
Right.
will participate with you to the extent you desire, and request us to participate, commentary and so forth. But ultimately, you're correct in that you're gonna go through this process, you're gonna start with a pool of candidates, and, as you review those resumes and cover letters, you will narrow that pool to the interviews.
Right. The last thing I'm just gonna say, and again, in terms of, people have heard of behavioral interviewing. Instead of asking people, what would you do in a situation, what have you done in a situation? And rather than, again, in terms of go through, and I asked Dennis the thing, and he's read the same book that I have, and he knows the standard answer. What would you do with a conflict situation, that kind of thing. Rather than that, turn it around, tell us about a conflict situation without names and identifications and all that. How did you handle that problem? And then listen, exactly, again, what Phil was saying is very, very important, okay? It's more of a thing in terms of the listening skills you need to pay attention to. And again, that's sort of been my experience, but I would just pass that along.
So Phil, you think
End
that
of
all the
sermon.
candidates have already read this?
I don't know. I mean, what I do know is this, is that you're gonna get a set of candidates. I would imagine the majority of the candidates will be people with direct local government experience. And that shouldn't be a shock to anybody because, people who are applying to be a town administrator, more than likely are people who are either a town manager or a town administrator in some other community. They might be an assistant, they might be in another role in another community, or in this community for all I know. The majority of your candidates most likely are gonna be people that are local government practitioners. You will have some candidates, perhaps, that are not local government practitioners, that are looking to either make a change into local government. So for instance, I know of several communities where people who retired from the military became town managers. I know of some communities where people transition from the private sector into the role. I know of some communities where select board members have applied to other communities. They say, based on my experience as a select board member of 15 years in this community, I think I'm qualified to be a manager in this community. So I think that it's like any other process for hiring, in that people have to make an affirmative decision to apply in their own mind. Good candidates, in my estimation, will do some research as to the position they're applying for and the company they're applying to. That's true in the private sector and the public sector. They're gonna do some research on the organization they're applying to, and they're going to try to demonstrate some base level of knowledge to demonstrate to the selection, whoever's doing the selection, yeah, I did some research on your corporation, and I know what the structure is, and I know, what the last stock market price is, or I did some research on your community and I know that your budget is $120 million. I know that your school department consumes 54% of the total budget, not including health insurance costs. I know your police department, 97% of its budget is salaries and benefits. I know the fire department is the same. And I know one of your biggest problems is that you've got an affordability problem coming up in the next 2 to 3 years because your growth factors in your health insurance, your retirement, in those areas where you really can't make many cuts unless you make cuts to personnel, are going to overwhelm the operating budget.
So the reason I asked that question, Phil, is because.
How was that? Very good.
Yes.
The reason I asked that question is because if this is the status quo questions, they're gonna come up with the status quo answers. So
Well-
if we ask our own questions, we're gonna get to see who the people really are. And
Well,
what-
first of all, they're not status quo questions. They're questions, first of all, you're a screening committee, you're not the final body for questioning. Second, they're questions that are designed to elicit from the candidates what their experience is and what their perspective is on several key areas of local government. So finance, communication, human resources, integrity, and leadership. Those are kind of the 4 key areas that are captured in the questions. And believe me, I mean, you don't have to believe me, and my suspicion is you won't believe me. But I will tell you from over 30 years of experience in hiring department heads and being involved in this process and so forth, when you do your interviews, you will be able to come to a conclusion who should not be forwarded and who should be forwarded. And the interview process does bring out of, and that's again, the whole reason to do the open-ended stuff and get folks talking, is you get to kind of get an insight into how they think. And that's really important because there's a couple of things in my estimation that are kind of true. Most of the applicants will have the technical skills to do the position. What do I mean by that? Most of the applicants, if not all the applicants, will have put together a municipal budget. They'll understand, procurement. They'll understand, human resource management to a degree. Some of it will just depend on how much they've done in their particular position, how big their organization and so forth. They will have all most likely been involved in collective bargaining and so forth and so on. The determination of who is going to ultimately be in this position will be in part their technical skills, but this committee will kind of forward people that all have experience to do the position. It will then depend upon how do they approach the position, a set of soft skills that is really teased out during final interviews. Because you're not just hiring a technician, you're trying to hire somebody who's going to be a good fit for the community. And based on kind of the interviews with the select board that were done to create the community profile, and based on kind of, at least my observation and research on the community, there's some really significant issues for the next administrator. One is communication is really important. Two is a strong relationship with the select board and understanding what their relationship is to the select board. And integrity. These are kind of really important issues. There are also other issues, don't get me wrong. There are issues about financial sustainability, there are issues about development pressures in the community, so forth and so on. But it's going to be how do they administer, what is their art of administration is going to be much more telling over, in terms of decision. You're going to get finalists that all can put together a municipal budget. You're going to get finalists who've all been in collective bargaining of some sort, most likely.
I get it, I know what I'm looking for.
Yeah. So,
Just two questions I have about questions. One is, in the profile you put together, was one of the people you interviewed the town councilor?
no, that was not. We interviewed the select board members. That's
Okay,
what
all right.
the
I
charter
just
is.
wanted
Because the
to know.
select board is, under your town charter,
Right.
the chief policy setting board in the community. There's no ambiguity of that in the town charter. They also, and the town administrator reports to the select board and takes direction from the select board. The town administrator is not independent of the select board, and that's the way it's written.
Right.
And as you know, we've had some problems with that.
I won't comment on that, it would be appropriate for me to do
It's
that.
outside the scope of.
And the
No,
other,
it's not.
so the other part of that is,
That's
Something
why
I wanna
we're
know the
here.
answer to.
the town council
That's why
will tell
we're
you a
here,
lot of
to
where the
find
money has
something
been
who will-
spent in terms of this
Do what
town,
they're
where
told.
mistakes have been
Yes.
made. So that was the only.
Yeah, again, I don't wanna
Yeah.
I don't
Right.
wanna relitigate the
Yeah.
past. What I can say is, your select board, I think, first of all, you have a 3-person select board, you have 3 folks that have opinions,
Yeah,
and they discuss with each other, in board meetings.
Right.
I don't think there's any shortage of, expression of opinion amongst your 3 board members, which is great. And, ultimately, they will make the selection.
the second question I had about questions was, you're probably gonna have people that are coming from a smaller community to here, and in terms of numbers, is that a question that comes up? And is it covered in any of this where, you've been in a town that has 10,000 people, this has 40,000 people in the summer, and there's all sorts of differences which you've enumerated very well. Is that an issue, and should we ask a question about that?
It's not necessarily an issue for the screening committee, it's more of an issue for the select board,
Okay.
if there is one. But I will tell you, if you look at, my career as an example.
Yeah.
Started as an assistant to the mayor in Attleboro, grant-funded position from the
Right.
state to bring some management in. The community was just under 50,000 in population at that time. Became town manager in a much smaller community, but the town manager position had much broader
Right.
authority. Became the town administrator in Natick, so went from a community of 10,000 to 35,000 in Natick. Was town administrator there, and then was asked back to Hull, and went back to Hull and finished my career there. So scaling isn't the issue. If I were interviewing me now, one of the questions I would ask at some point, if I saw kind of the difference in population,
Right.
is in a much smaller community, often you're not doing as much delegation. You're
Correct.
You just don't have as much
Right.
span. You just don't have as much staff. So the question I think I would ask would be something about, what is your ability to delegate? How do you delegate? Are you able
Yeah,
to
right.
delegate? And do you enjoy delegating? I mean, I liked the fact that people knocked on my door and I talked to them directly. I did not enjoy, as a manager, having 4 layers between me and members of the general public. That was just me.
Right.
But there are some folks that do enjoy that and can do that and want to do that. So I think scale comes up as part of kind of a finalist.
That the select board takes
Right.
care of, okay.
Right. Your job is to, again, start with the universe,
Right.
boil it down to a set of finalists to be put forward to the select board. You really want to kind of, in the FAST acronym, you kind of want to make sure that you've given the candidates a hard look and that you feel comfortable that the
Right.
folks that you forwarded are ready for the next step
Yeah.
in terms of being interviewed by the select board. You're not selecting the town administrator.
So it didn't necessarily come down to 3, we might come up with 4 or something
You
like
could
that.
come up with 4, you can come up with 2
More.
you can come up with 5. I mean,
Depending on
it just depends
what
on.
the yield in terms
Yeah,
of.
exactly. You're not limited to how many people you can put forward. That's something that again, the process will help define.
And has the select board ever
Linda, you have a
rejected
question?
the applicants?
Yes, there's been times when, I think there are occasions where a couple of different things happen. There are times when, and you see this with school superintendents, but it's happened with town administrators, town managers as well. School superintendents, there was a period of time when there was kind of a shortage of school superintendent applicants. So people would get right through to the finalist position, they'd be interviewed, they'd be offered the position, and then their community would offer them more to stay. If you look, that's happened many times in Massachusetts. That's also, I was a finalist in a position in another community and my board offered me more to stay, and I stayed. So that happens. Now, does it happen a lot? It's hard to say. It depends upon, there's ebbs and flows in municipal hiring and municipal cycles, and a lot just depends on, partly what
So
their
then we have to go
situation.
back to the drawing
I
board?
believe
for that?
Linda
No,
has
not
a question.
necessarily.
Linda's up next,
Yeah.
after
So-
Steve's question is answered.
In terms of if you go through the process and a finalist is selected and then the finalist declines, or they can't agree to terms on a contract, yeah, it's like any other job offer. You run a business.
So we go back again?
I don't know if,
It's
no, the select board may do a different selection committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, they may say, call and center, see you later. But the bottom line is, this is a hiring process. It's intended to try to bring forward the best candidates for consideration. More often than not, it's successful, meaning that a candidate is hired and the candidate works in the community for a good while. There are some exceptions to that. We don't expect that. Nobody plans for that, but there's certain things beyond any of our control.
Linda, you have a
So
question?
No, it's more of a statement to go back to your fast
Okay.
thing, but, cause it's.
I'm glad you're buying in.
Cause it's 7 PM and I think
Yeah.
that we should really start going through the questions
I-
to
All right,
narrow
I think
them down
that,
and
I think
discuss
that's a
which
good
ones we're gonna
idea.
do.
Thank you.
Okay,
How do you feel
so
about that, Phil?
I'm ready for that. I guess,
Okay.
is everyone okay with, based on now kind of at least the explanation of context and explanation of how we've kind of arrived at the revised set, trying to incorporate as
Right.
directionally as much of the comments as we received, are people okay with these questions?
So I just.
So
wanna
let me
say-
just,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'll just do a Q1, question
That's
one.
is question 1.
Okay.
So I still feel like question 1 I think we're gonna get that information from a resume and cover letter.
Um,
Whether they're a manager or leader. I know obviously, the way you've explained it, I think in that sense it's a good question, but I'm just wondering if there's, some of the other questions might be better to be replaced.
All right, so
But,
why don't we
you know, yeah.
park it,
Okay,
and we'll go to question 2. Let's see if we can get the ones that we agree on
yep,
done first.
Yeah.
And then we can circle back to anything that we park. So let me just make this. let me just highlight that. Okay, question 2. Describe your level of experience and direct involvement. I'm not even gonna read them out loud. because,
Right.
Yep.
But you can see the question. Are people okay with that?
Very important, yes.
Okay. Question 3. So somebody had kind of tried to make this very specific to the select board, and it's important that this really, but there are other boards that are elected that a town administrator is gonna be interacting with. So you can see it's a little more general, because a town administrator would most likely be interacting from time to time with a planning board, or with a conservation commission, or things of that nature.
Could you also have potentially a candidate, they may be coming from a city
Yep.
that would not happen to be worked with elected board, which would be
Right.
potentially be something new for them?
Yeah, I mean, having worked in the city form of government, you're working sometimes with the city council.
Okay.
So same concept.
it might be public sector though too,
Right.
or military, I mean,
Right.
you did say, so,
And they may say in that, for instance, well, I haven't had any direct experience working with an elected board or committee, but I've served on my school committee in the community I come from, or something of that nature. So you'll get a sense of,
Yep.
of that. Yep. All right,
And
question.
then question 3 would be the scope of how much you did with working with the board.
Yeah, you would expect,
Okay.
it's,
You can do a
There's a
follow-up.
follow-up.
yeah,
question.
describe your experience,
Right.
and they're gonna talk to you
Yeah.
about that. Question 4 is explain, you can see what it is, explain your experience. And this is small p politics, so it's not party politics, it's not Democrat, Republican Party, it's working, town managers, town administrators, police chiefs, fire chiefs, school superintendent, you name it, whether it's even the laborer out in the field. There is a political, I call it small p politics, there's a political element to these positions. Somebody comes up to you and says, my best friend is the chair of the Board of Selectmen, and I think my street should be paved. Do you have that on the paving list? Well, you know what, I've got a 5-year paving plan, and your street's not on there, it's on year 6.
Is that a paving plan?
Okay, well, I guess you don't have a paving plan. But, I'll give you,
I wish we did.
in Hull, just as a very quick aside, one of the biggest challenges was everybody's seawall was in the worst shape.
Oh, yeah.
So I actually commissioned one of the first seawall
Yes,
one of the
seawalls
first
is a big
seawall
one.
studies in the state, and we actually prioritized it and had an engineering firm prioritize it in a fashion that I was always able to say, yeah, I know your seawall's bad, but you're here on the list compared to here, and that's the equalizer. But everybody's is in the worst shape. So question 4 is okay?
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay. Question 5, this was kind of an issue that people kind of talked about, is transparency and communication. And again, you want them to kind of talk about, what is their communication style? What tools do they use to communicate? You're gonna be really intrigued to hear some of these answers, because some managers are very adept at social media and doing other things, a town Facebook page, whatever it might be. I don't want to get into too much detail here, but this will kind of allow you to get a sense of what their style is and how they employ their strategies to communicate to the public.
Is this something that comes in terms of your experience or lack of experience in dealing with the union environment and how you communicate? Or is that something the select board has taken up?
That could be something, it depends on how they view that. You could, if I were hearing that question as a candidate, I think I would parse it into kind of 2 or 3 silos. I would parse, one silo would be is how do I communicate to the general public? Do I
Right.
publish a monthly newsletter or a weekly newsletter? Or do I, what is the manner in which I make sure the public's informed of things that are going on in community of
Right.
note? And then there's, how do I communicate with my own select board and other stakeholders? And then what do I do with employee communication?
Yeah.
That's the silos I would kind of break that
Right.
into it. But then there might be some candidates that look at that and just think of public only. So I think you're gonna wanna kind of hear, how they're parsing these questions and to what extent, are they thinking you know, are they just taking kind of first level responses,
Right,
first level
gotcha.
review, or are they
Yeah.
drilling down? And can they
Right.
drill down quickly and respond with some degree of
Right.
detail, in my estimation?
Okay.
Okay, question, it says question 9 only because we
Yep.
got rid of some, but we've got some A's coming up. So Q9, describe your experience in strategic planning. And again, that's like a very general term. So strategic planning can cover a whole bunch of, can cover the topics that are here: budgeting, goals, planning, staffing. So for staffing, as an example of strategic planning might be succession planning.
Right.
You know, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do they even bring that up? Kind of, in my estimation, kind of an important topic, especially when you've got certain positions that are very hard to fill. So how are you going to promote growth from within, as an example? So Q9, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Q10, this again is, you know, as you pointed out, this is like a huge time sinkhole for most town managers and administrators, is human resource management. And so they should be able to talk to that issue and what has been their role and how do they view that. But it takes a disproportionate amount of time of most managers' daily, weekly, monthly, yearly schedule, because they can be very thorny issues sometimes. Are people okay with Q10?
Yeah.
Okay. Describe your experience, well, I'm not gonna read it again, but this
Yeah.
is something that they should be able to talk
Right,
about
right.
authoritatively.
Yeah.
This next question goes to their experience with project development and, you know, how they kind of go about doing that. What have they learned from that?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
This Q16 is the last question, so we'll, you know, we can slide A 1 through 4, we'll feather those in. That would be their closing remarks, okay? So it's really an opportunity for them to kind of address you folks and say, you know, here's my last pitch to why you should consider me, you know, why you should forward me for consideration. And this is
Doesn't
kind of the.
necessarily have to be the last question by the chair. Could one of my committee,
Yeah, you can do
Or-
it. Yeah, you can certainly do it.
or maybe it, as a wrap up, maybe perhaps protocol would dictate that it
Yeah.
is the chair.
And
It's-
again, this is kind of the inverse of the typical first question of tell us about yourself and why you want this position. This is really the inverse of that question in some ways, but it does give them an opportunity to kind of say, you know, I enjoyed meeting you folks. You know, here's why I think I'd be a great fit for your community, and give
Okay.
some closing remarks and make some final impressions on the committee, whatever those might be.
Okay, I could,
Yeah, because if they didn't give us something during our questions.
Yes, they have
That they
something.
feel is important.
Exactly.
They have that opportunity
Yeah.
to deliver.
Do a lot of them just start off whether you ask them or not, why I want to come here and why I want to work there?
It's kind of interesting because I've seen some folks do a really nice job with that question.
Yeah.
And then some folks that are, you know, it just depends, you know, believe it or not, there are some other factors that affect how they perform during an interview.
Right.
You know, are they tired? Did they have a select board meeting the previous night that went till 11:30, 12 o'clock and they're just exhausted and they're
Yeah.
flat? You know, that happens during
Yeah.
interviews, but that's, you know, that's just part of the whole process.
Process,
Again, that's not unique to municipal government. It's just, that happens in job interviews. Candidates show up and they're flat. It happens, and, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, there's nothing we can do to account for that. I think you'll see, once you get through with these questions with the candidates, that you'll have a good sense of who this person is. You'll have a sense of how they would approach the position and what their experience level is compared to what their resume is. The resume is just kind of a factual bullet point,
Right.
kind of recreation of what their, you know, it's their history. But you want to know the story behind the history. And that's what these questions are kind of designed.
So when we see the resume, you've gone through it and find out that they did or did not graduate from where they said they graduated.
Yeah, we'll do that is the once you kind of make a selection of finalists.
Okay, yeah.
You know, and again, there are going to be I'm sure there are gonna be candidates that have applied, multiple positions.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean they're not a good candidate.
Right.
You're gonna have a breadth of candidacy, although I would say the majority of candidates typically, and this should not shock anybody, people that are applying to be a finance, an accountant in a private sector position, there's not many plumbers that are applying for those jobs. The vast majority of applicants are accountants.
Yeah.
So the vast majority of applicants for this position will be people who have worked in government in some fashion. That's what I would expect.
Statewide, are we looking at a lot of town administrators that they're trying to fill positions in? Insofar as you can talk about that.
In this area, there's probably 3 in this kind of area. Statewide, there's probably at any given time about a half a dozen.
Oh,
The thing is though, again, kind of taking a look from a personal perspective, having been an applicant,
yeah, yeah.
when it's again no different than when you're looking for a job anywhere.
Yeah.
You evaluate what that opportunity is,
Yeah.
and some places it's not about they're offering more money or whatever. It could be that they're offering a little more money, but you view it as a better place to work, or it's just an exciting opportunity. People apply for all sorts of different reasons.
Right.
And
When you're checking their backgrounds, do you also look into their financial backgrounds?
no.
What about their history with it, say they're working in another town? What about their history with that town?
Yeah.
So you would call up a board of selectmen to say, we can't do it with someone who's currently working at that town, I understand that. But someone who is no longer working at a town, would you call up the board of selectmen and say? how
We are
does that
given,
work out?
we're given references, and we'll certainly look at the references, and there may be soft references as well.
Everybody gets good
I just
references when they
answered
leave.
your question.
You're right.
You know, 'cause that's the.
I said there's references
agree.
and there are soft references.
Right.
Right.
And, the reality is that,
That's the nature of government.
no, it's an
Screw
nature
up,
of,
get
all
promotion.
no, that's not what I said. You didn't.
That's what I said.
No, I understand that, but that's not what I said. What I said is that, again, the way this process works, just to be clear, is you're gonna get these resumes to look at, you'll boil them down to interviews, you'll make a determination of who you would recommend to be finalists.
Yeah.
Before those finalist names are public, we go to each one of those applicants and we say, look, congratulations, you've been selected to be a finalist for this position. Do you agree to be a finalist? And the reason we ask that question is once they're named, they agree to be a finalist, their name is public. Okay? Before we do that, we do the background checks and other things to verify legitimacy. So we're not gonna put forward a finalist that, and if there's a problem with that, we
So,
will come back to the
After
committee.
we get the finalists, I know you said you didn't want this to happen before the finalists were given. So after the finalists are picked, so I don't know how that would work.
What's that?
Well, I was thinking about how we could call up the town that they work for and see what terms they left on, but then what good would that do us if we already picked them as a finalist, right? That wouldn't help us at all,
Correct.
Again,
Correct.
because we've already,
yeah, because
We've
you
already
can't,
decided
because
to be a
as
finalist.
semi-finalists, Massachusetts general law gives them some protection. And the protection is they may not have told their employer they're looking for a position. They may not want their name out there unless they're, and they do not want.
I understand not contacting a town with someone.
And so there's no way to kind of.
But, if someone left, I wanna know what the people who are running the town feel about
It's
the
not your
job
job.
you did.
That's not the committee's job. The committee's job is not to do that final piece of that puzzle. That's just not your function.
We're screening.
You're
what's
screening,
coming in.
you're not doing the.
That's not part of screening, knowing
No.
why the terms they left on.
Because you're inhibiting, the problem is you put your finger on it precisely, which is, there's no way for a screening committee member to approach a current or former employer, or even let's say you know a department head, you know the police chief in the town they're applying from, and you call that person up and say, hey, what can you tell me about John Smith?
Right.
And the chief's going, what are you asking? What, all of a sudden you're calling out of the blue and asking me about, John Smith? Well, I'm being coy, but, everybody reads between the lines. So
Yeah.
you can't do it.
I get that you
Yeah.
can do it to someone who's currently working.
No, even somebody who's not working, because, first of all, I don't think you're gonna get, it's unlikely you're gonna see a scenario of I won't say any further. I just know that what your limitations are. And that piece of the puzzle is not your function. It's just not. So we'll do screening, we'll make sure that the, person is qualified to be considered a finalist in terms of educational attainment, so forth and so on, Corey, things of that nature.
So A1, 2, 3, and 4, are we?
Yeah, the question is are you okay with, so I think if you add them all up, we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so I think that's a total of 14.
Oh, okay.
And the recommendation is to incorporate these 4 because they are reflective of comments received from committee members. They're not direct translations of what committee members said, geez, I'd like to ask a question on this, but there were several committee members that were interested in the conflict of interest issues.
That would be A4.
That would be A1.
A1.
A1 is conflict of interest. There was some question about, how do you hold departments accountable? And so, it was worded differently, but that was the concept. So
I
we,
mean, I can see somebody, you ask them the question A1 and they say, I send them to state training and they take the course on conflict of interest.
we'll see what
That's
they
how I
say.
saw it.
Well, that may be an answer, but there may be another answer.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, I could answer that
I mean, they could-
differently. That, may be a better answer.
Yeah,
Okay, so the point is these 4 are reflective of feedback received from committee members as
Yeah.
to topic areas. And we would feather those in, they would become, 16 would be the last question, and
Right.
they would become,
Other ones in
yeah.
Yep.
So if you're okay with those, we'll incorporate those. And then we have our 14 questions.
Except for mine.
We're gonna get, well, I'll leave the chair to talk about that, but, and then we still have to circle back to question 1.
Yeah.
So are you okay with A1 through 4?
yes, I am.
Well,
Yeah.
if we're gonna hear additional questions, I'd be
Well,
careful to approve
yeah.
all.
Yeah, we're not looking to approve it, I just wanna know if the wording of those questions are okay, A1 through 4.
What is
All right, with me.
single most important all the time?
But I think your second question, we could
There's no real
always
overlap with
talk
these
about-
questions,
Yeah.
so.
That's
A
okay.
grade.
Okay.
I'm okay.
Alright, so the
And
hold
it
I
has to be
had
potential.
was on
Yeah,
question
we
1.
add that into it.
So he could reword it.
Yeah.
and
Right.
put it in.
So the hold I have is on
Yeah.
question 1. Are you a manager or a leader? And if you could kind of talk to that issue a little bit.
Well, I just think that based on their cover letter, their resume, we're gonna see what they've done for work, whether they have been a town administrator, whether they're in the private sector and they're a manager, things like that. Like, we're gonna know yes or no. And then, I get the point of having them explain it. I just think that maybe there might be other questions that we might want instead of something that we can get off their resume. and
So
cover letter.
this question is designed to kind of tease out 2 concepts.
Mm-hmm.
There is a manager, but not all managers are leaders.
Yeah.
So an administrator, in my estimation, you want them to have both skill sets. And you'd like them to be able to see if they can articulate what it is, how do they view those skill sets, and how do those skill sets work in concert with each other. So that's the concept behind the question.
Yep.
So the resume will tell you that they were in positions of authority, but not necessarily tell you if they were leaders.
Right. But some of the other questions kind of go into that
That's
though
true.
too.
That's
So, I don't know.
Yep, okay.
I'm not saying we have to, I fully agree with your explanation and I think I'm leaning more towards keeping it, but I don't know what others think. What do you think?
I like it, I think it's like Phil had said, it does give the candidate an opportunity to articulate when that person needed to be a leader and when that person needed to just manage a situation.
Yeah.
I like it too, same reasons.
So,
Agreed.
yeah, I did have my notes, it was the weakest question I thought of the list, especially if it's I wouldn't put it the lead off if you're gonna use it as well, because
Yeah.
I think it could potentially add value after we get to know them a little bit better. But I thought it would be, I think it's an odd question to begin with, very open-ended, I get that. But I thought it would, it would,
Do you see another place you would put it within the order? What would be your first question?
well, you already took mine off, so you didn't tell me about yourself.
Well, but do you understand the rationale of that?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I wouldn't fight that, right? So, and again, I've always felt the question is less important than the attributes I'm trying to pull from those interviews. So the structure of these questions are, again, debatable, and I'm not gonna live and die off them, but they do cover the 6 attributes that I would certainly hope to accomplish. I think I think the communications or the community involvement would at least get the conversation flowing, and then would potentially lead to asking if they, are manager or leader, if that's a question that the board wanted to keep in there.
So are people okay with moving Q6 to Q1? That's the communication style question.
And that would be the first question.
That could be the first question, and
And
then,
that would, because Q1 would be asked by the chair, I'd be comfortable starting with a Q6
I,
as a lead off.
I kinda like Q2 as just as a kind of a generic kind of question, and might get that candidate to kind of, as being the first question, to just let them come out and, 'cause I do think that it kind of will show whether or not they know what our size budget of our town is and what they've worked at, so it's a pretty straightforward question for them to kind of get into the process of answering these questions.
Well, the budget to me is so critical. I'd be okay with making that the first question. I would-
are people okay with that being the first question?
I like the self-image one,
What's the self-image?
With the self,
the one that you get, you had thrown out about, tell me about yourself. I wanna know this guy's personality.
What if we did
I wanna know who he thinks he is. What's his self-image?
I think you're gonna hear that throughout the course of the question.
Yeah, but these could be rehearsed answers.
Well, they all are,
I wanna, tell me who you are.
okay, we
Every
heard that.
question is-
Jackie has a question.
What if we use the question like every leader has their own style? How would you describe yours? It's kind of
Oh, that's true.
so that
you
get
can do
the
that.
leader part and what they're about
It's a little of both.
and how they would manage our town.
I think that's good, just from my own combat experience. I would follow it up with, do you think of yourself as a manager or a leader? Because otherwise they go off in terms of,
So,
That would be
I
the
wanna
second
solve
part
the
of the
problems
question.
of the world.
so let me ask this question, if we edit Q1 to, I'm just gonna type it as I'm going, every leader, repeat it please?
Every leader has their own style. How would you describe yours?
Style, how would you? I gotta make sure I'm hitting the right keys.
Would you,
Describe
Give credit to Jackie.
yours.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then,
Would you describe yourself as a manager or leader, right?
so then we might wanna just change the leader and each leader has like each town administrator has a style.
Oh,
Can I,
If you say leader in the first
Yeah.
sentence and then ask if they're a leader or
Oh,
can I just inject a little bit of, like, again, are we trying to find someone that is a leader, or are we trying to find someone that is a manager? Like,
Both, you say.
I mean, I agree, but I'm, with what we're trying to banding about here, it looks like,
Yeah,
are we trying to tailor this first question to get a leader, or are we trying to get a manager?
well, I think
I
again.
don't know the answer to that.
The
I
reason to
just-
do it, that kind of harkens back to the rationale of having them tell you what they are.
Right, that was a question.
Which also goes to kind of your point,
I-
Steve,
I
is you
just-
wanna get a sense of who they are, what do they think of themselves as? Do they understand that, there's some, there's multiple hats here?
okay, so
And-
we take it all back that if we do a manager or leader, it kind of fits what everybody is looking for and wants.
It gives them a chance to kind of, and you'll see what balance they assign it in their,
Leader means to me that, like, I was captain on boats my whole life, right? So I give orders and you do what you're told, or else that style won't work here. Because we have some pretty competent people, like, say, for instance, Phil Tavares. No one's telling him what to do. He's probably the best chief of police in this whole state. So we don't want him telling them what to do.
Right.
You know, that's not his policy. His policy is money, yeah, that's about it. But,
I don't wanna say.
Or
too
a
much.
fire
I don't wanna,
chief, you
I
know,
think
tell
that's,
a fire chief
I think
what
that's
to
a
do.
question,
Oh,
I think that observation, I think that observation is an observation you'll talk about when you deliberate over the candidates' responses,
Yeah.
okay? And I'm not discounting that observation at
That's a good
all.
point, yeah.
But my point is as you hear the interviews, and you can always ask a follow-up question as an answer to that, which, you know, something along the lines of, well, you know, how do you address department officials who are very competent? You know, I know as a manager, and every manager has, again, it doesn't matter if it's public sector, private sector, I don't care where it is, every manager has a staff. You know, there are people that report to that manager, and that manager is responsible for directing in some fashion. Every manager should know the competency of that staff. So I had people on my staff that I, you know, didn't have to really worry about. They'd come to me when they had a problem, I'd make sure that they had the resources they needed to do the job, didn't have to give it 3 thoughts. I had others that I knew I had to manage a little more closely because either they were new in their positions or newer, and they didn't have experience, so forth and so on. So, you know, every manager is constantly evaluating the capabilities of their staff, and every manager knows where they're going to be spending effort in managing individuals. So if I've got a, you know, and I've had new police chiefs, experienced police chiefs, or department heads, if I have a well-experienced department head that knows their job and so forth, yeah, I'm gonna have communication with them, what's going on, everything happened, you know, you need anything, tell me, or whatever. But I'm not gonna jump in and try to micromanage that person, because they don't need it. Whereas if I have a newly appointed department head that might not have gone through a budget process directly, they were an assistant or something, and then, okay, your first cycle, I'm gonna sit next to you, make sure that, you know, it all goes well, I'll ride shotgun, as an example.
Okay, we've only got another 15 minutes.
My computer just showed up.
So I mean, I think are you a manager or a leader, and the way they respond, and they might respond both, and this gives us more insight into who they
Yeah.
are, which goes back to what you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I do agree now with the explanation that it's not as vague as I thought.
So is it okay to leave that as a Q1, or do you wanna move it to a different rotation?
I personally would be okay if it was Q1 if we added kind of Jackie's softener into it. You know,
I think that would.
every town administrator is unique.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself a leader or a manager?
Oh, okay, all right, so,
Yeah.
That's good too.
okay,
yeah.
so, let me just capture, are you okay, is everyone okay if we capture that
Yes.
line?
Yes.
All right, so let me just real quick type that in, how about this way, every manager has a unique approach.
I just
I
be
think
afraid to use
town-
manager twice. You don't want to say
Yeah.
manager.
Yeah, so
or-
town administrator,
Town administrator.
Well, they may not all be town administrators.
Well, this role is though.
Or just say every
They're
administrator.
gonna be if they get hired, so.
All right, so every administrator, why don't you walk me through the
Every
verbiage?
town administrator is
Yeah.
unique. Describe your, explain or describe your style, and are you a manager or a leader?
because I mean, question 3, where they work with elected board. The other candidates, there might be some that haven't worked with elected board, but they can change that to answer it in a way where, you know, I don't have an experience with elected board, however, I do have this, and this is my approach. You know, they might have to tailor it.
All right, so I've got as the edit on that, every town administrator is unique, and I'll fix the spelling and all that, I don't wanna waste time on my battery. Every town administrator is unique, describe your style, and are you a manager or a leader? Okay,
That's good.
does that capture it?
Yes.
All right, so that's now Q1.
Yep.
Okay, all right, so we've done that. I don't think we had any other edits, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then we'll slide A1 through 4 back into rotation. So the last question will be Q16. And that's it for the recommendations, and then I'll leave it to the chair to recognize other members for what other items.
The only other one I thought of, and it just to have us think of, you want a specific question in there, on how do you deal with change? Because that's, and it's implied in a lot of the things you have already. I'm just spelling it out. I'm not saying we need another question. if you think it's implied in some of the other, and it is, you know, how do you deal with change, human resources, things like that.
I think
But
you'll,
that, it's a big thing within this town, I believe,
yeah.
Change.
change,
That's with everywhere.
or lack thereof, or,
Yeah.
you know, like,
But it can, a lot of things will be follow-ups based on what.
oh yeah, that's the
candidate
other
says,
thing,
too,
yeah, so we
you
can
know?
follow up with that,
Well, you've got, if you go to Q9, you've got describe your experience in strategic planning.
yeah. Yeah, okay,
And that's all about change
yeah,
and anticipating change
Right.
and looking at horizons and, you know.
Okay, good.
What is your horizon? Is
Yeah.
it 1 year, 3 years, 5 years?
yeah,
Much beyond that is useless. Nobody can predict 10 years.
right.
And do we still have to agree on A1 through 4, or are we?
I thought we were all okay with it.
We're all
Yeah,
okay with that.
Yep.
one, yeah.
Making sure.
Okay, so we'll feather those back in to the location, and then the last question will be Q16. Okay? That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
All right.
So then we need to vote on how we're
Should
gonna
we
do it, right?
discuss on the model that we're going to
Well, why don't we
utilize
take a
at
vote
this
on these
point,
as a
or-
draft, why don't we take a vote on these as drafts?
Okay,
Steve is correct.
all right. So I make a motion that the amendments and changes that we've identified on our recommended questions V2 be accepted.
Second,
Second.
I hear a second. Aye.
Aye.
all right,
Aye. It's unanimous. They've all, or Mr. Lynch, Steve? did
Yeah,
you-
sure.
Oh, okay. It's unanimous. Thank you. All right, so the next, is there anything else, Phil, that you want to add?
Nothing else on questions. I want to thank the committee for, you know, how efficient you were on this.
Well, we have to vote on the method of asking them.
But
You can do that now, or you can
Yeah, might
also
as
do
well.
it, yeah, whatever your desire is.
So I'm gonna make a motion that
Okay.
we vote that each individual person gets to ask their 2 questions.
I'll second that.
Second. Aye.
Do we-
Just quick
okay.
discussion, how
Oh,
does that,
okay, we
yeah,
can-
just a more of a protocol, not that, I'm not
Okay.
against that. How do we decide which questions we ask? And do we prioritize so that if someone is long-winded, only 4 people ask questions and the 3 people don't get to their questions?
Well,
'Cause-
well, that'll be.
You're
part
gonna
of the
get through, well,
Chair's responsibility to make sure that
get through
time is allotted appropriately. And for whatever reason I see here, Q1 appears to be the first question, and it's asked by the chair, and Q16 is the last to be by the chair.
so,
I'm comfortable,
I'm sorry.
I'm comfortable with that, and if the rest of the committee, I would take those 2 questions, because there must be a reason for that type of structure.
And to the couple of points. Very rarely will you not get to all the questions, and that's not a reflection of the committee, it's a reflection of the long-windedness of the candidate. But again, if you see somebody going long, you know, you'll see me either going like this to the chair, or I'll actually, if the committee gives me authority, you know, I'll actually jump in and say, look, you know, we have a very limited time. You can tell the candidates up front, we have a certain amount of time for this, so, you know, we want you to explain as completely as possible, but keep in mind, you know, there's 14 questions we're gonna be going through here. In terms of who asks what questions, the chair's questions are defined. One way which I think works well is you take the balance of questions and you go round robin. So you'll say, okay, question number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Except I'm asking my own questions.
Well, you can't ask your own questions unless the committee permits that. But that's a whole different discussion. So the questions that are approved are the questions that are approved by the committee. And you're a member of a
You don't
committee.
care about the selectmen's input on what they wanna know?
No, because I don't think it's appropriate, if I may.
No, in fairness to Steve Fass, we discussed, those questions that you might have can always be asked by the select board. And they have that opportunity to ask those types of questions that pertain to your thoughts. Is that correct, Phil?
Well, it's not only that, but the select board, that's exactly correct. The select board can ask the questions they want to ask during their process.
Does this, can I just for clarity's sake, is this, so you're telling me that the select board has this committee set up to do this and do this protocol, but yet they want questions for us to ask during that?
I didn't say that, I just
Okay.
said that I have questions that I think that they would like answered.
Okay.
Well, they will be able to speak for themselves, and they will be able to address their questions in their format. This committee has chosen these 14 questions based on the process we've just gone through. If the committee wants to entertain additional questions, we would not recommend that because of all the reasons stated earlier.
So for what I can do, as you said, I can do
Well, that's why I
I
said
can
for you
do
to
a
speak up
follow,
when we were talking about the,
but I can do that as a follow-up question to that question. That's
so.
what I can do.
Yeah. if you
The question
provide
Avery,
fits
what is
in.
the single most important role of a town administrator?
Yep.
His second question, do you believe the job of a TA is to strictly adhere to the policies of the select board?
So I can make that a follow-up question to that.
So the,
After
usually
the
the,
answers.
well, so usually, so I was saying maybe you could propose that as a secondary to this question. The follow-ups are based on what they, whatever, so you know, whatever the response is, you're trying to inquire more on what they said, not a totally separate question.
Well, that should be part of what they answer anyway to that question, I would think. Whether or not
Right.
they're gonna implement the policy of the select board, who was their direct bosses, right?
Is the final questions with the select board, is that public session or executive?
Public.
Public, yeah.
Okay.
Those are public. The final interviews are all public.
Okay.
And
Any other
select board
So we
discussion?
could attend it, or we could watch it. on-
You can attend it, members of the public attend it. As a matter of fact,
Who
it's,
is the crown?
it's
Yeah.
very
And then I
common
can slip
for.
this into some of the budget questions,
Yeah.
you know, I could, as like a follow-up.
So it
question.
has to be follow-up based on what they said.
Well, we're
But-
talking about money,
yes.
right, so then I
So
can make
your
a
first
statement.
question, Marshfield does not have a revenue problem, it has a spending problem. What will you do to control waste in the spending of Marshfield?
I'm not sure that's a fair question to ask, for a couple of different reasons, that's a highly political question. It's, well, that's not the job of the administrator the administrator does not set the tax rate. The administrator submits a budget under your charter to the select board.
He negotiates the budget with the school committee.
Not if you read the charter.
Well,
Okay,
Mike
we're gonna-
Maresco negotiated the budget with the
I
school
understand,
committee.
I am not talking about.
But we're not doing ancient history
Right.
anymore,
I'm talking
but we
about
need
what
to
the
start
authorities
wrapping
are.
it up here before
Bring it back to the
discussions.
question.
We're having some discussion
Okay.
and
Just
questions,
for
but
clarity, though,
one
we were
last.
asked to make adjustments to this, to be sent on Monday by yesterday for these questions.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I just feel like,
Right.
like Bill was saying, there's a little bit of a gotcha moment going on here with these questions.
I agree.
where We're just, we're gonna be asking them, and it's just gonna lead to
I'll be happy
some
to ask
inconsistencies
your
in our
questions
candidates.
as a follow-up.
Okay.
It's part of the question that's relative.
That's fine. Any other
Okay.
To
discussion
the extent
then?
that time permits.
You're right, okay.
Any other discussion on that then? Moving along, then the next item on
Well, we
the
have to
agenda.
vote. We have to vote.
Oh, of course. All right. I make a motion.
Steve already made the motion.
Oh.
Second by Jackie. I asked him for a deliberation, so motion's on the floor. so
The
we
motion
can
is
vote.
on the floor, so.
And the motion was?
Then each individual asks the question.
So round robin.
Yeah.
Round robin and limited to 2 questions each.
Right,
All right?
correct.
The motion has been made to approve the recommended questions on V2 with limitation to 2 questions proposed by each of the committee members.
Well, that's not the motion, Andy, but anyway,
But,
we already did that motion and voted that.
The second motion is just really on the methodology of asking questions. I don't think the motion, it just said each committee member will ask 2
2.
out of the remaining 12 questions. The chair has 2 identified questions, there are 12 questions remaining. Each committee member will ask 2.
2 questions.
I don't know if you want to amend it to say, and those shall be distributed in a round robin fashion. It's kind of the generally accepted concept of round robin.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to, that's fine by me.
okay. So, second,
Aye.
and aye. All right, it's unanimous. And it's 5 o'clock, okay?
Fine.
Instead of 6? Let's take
What day is that?
a look around
Wednesday,
So Wednesday.
to 5 o'clock,
October
moving it up
15th.
to,
15th is a Tuesday, I think.
is a Tuesday.
no, it's a Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday.
October 15th.
Good by me.
Let me see.
Even better.
5 AM.
Nobody's asked me yet, but it's on the town administrator's description. If somebody asks me how do they apply, it's on there, tells them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought, okay.
Okay, all right. So you have that, Jack? As a
Yes.
date?
Let me just
Perfect.
check.
All right, so that is
Let me just
moving
make
it
sure-
up.
Let me just make sure that that's.
Oh, okay.
Hold on, I just wanna look at the chart here. No, 14th, Tuesday the 14th, excuse me. Tuesday the 14th. The 15th, we had one person who couldn't make. Could that one person, maybe I'll talk to that person.
All right, so it's amended now to October 14th, Tuesday.
So I have
At
to look
5
and see if
o'clock.
I have a ZBA meeting on the 14th, it's Tuesday
I
night.
think you had said yes to that night.
According
You,
to
the way you
calendar.
responded.
I responded no Friday, Saturdays or so.
Right, which the implication was is you would be available, I mean, that was the reason why we sent the chart out, is so that you could specifically identify dates that don't work.
I don't even know if we have a ZBA meeting there, because the agenda hasn't been posted yet.
Okay,
Okay, but
Right,
I
I'll
will
look.
tell you the dilemma on trying to schedule this many people is trying to get
And what time
days.
did you want to do it on Tuesday?
5 o'clock.
Well, that's good, because the meetings don't start till
Very good, all
7 or
right.
something.
Okay, so 5 o'clock then,
On
October
the 14th.
the 14th.
Yeah.
And as far as the venue, I want to thank Jackie. She found this venue. I'm a little uncomfortable with this venue because it's small. And we're going to start getting a situation where we're going to have a lot of paper and we need space, and when we start to interview. So what I have done, I've started to work on another venue, namely the Emergency Occupation Center in the police department. I feel very good about it. I think we have about a 95% chance of being approved, so we may be able to utilize that as a new venue.
Are we gonna get to take these applications home with us?
As it is now,
You're gonna get yes, you're gonna be able to see everything.
Okay.
it is now 7:45 p.m. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second? Aye.
Well, we have the annual
It's
website, you're
unanimous.
overlooking us.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much.